This is Niagara Falls. If you've never been there, it's an awe-inspiring force of nature that captivates millions of tourists every single year. But underneath its overwhelming beauty lies a dark history that's honestly confusing to me. Imagine standing at the edge, the deafening roar of water swallowing every other sound, the mist chilling your skin. Now take one step closer, deliberately. You can feel the pull of gravity, wanting to suck you in. Over the years, daredevils and thrill-seekers chose to fight this relentless cascade, and not all lived to tell the tale. These are their stories. As always, viewer discretion is advised. Let's start with the incredible story of Charles Stevens. Charles was not your average man. He was a 58-year-old barber from Bristol, England, with a daring spirit that the normal routines of everyday life couldn't contain. Can you imagine leaving behind the comfort of your job to fly across the world and face one of the most powerful natural wonders on Earth? That's exactly what Charles decided to do. In the early 1900s, Niagara Falls had become a magnet for thrill-seekers and daredevils looking to make a name for themselves. The challenge here was extremely dangerous but simple. Go over the falls in a barrel and survive. Yes, I did say barrel. I'm not really sure who came up with that idea in the first place, but somehow it became an almost normal stunt for people to try. Although it certainly didn't hurt, this stunt wasn't just for the adrenaline rush, but also for the fame and fortune successfully pulling it off brought. The idea of barrel stunting involved making a specially designed barrel that could withstand the immense crushing force of the falls. These barrels, which often came in different sizes and shapes, were reinforced with materials like steel and wood, and sometimes even padded to protect the person inside. On July 11, 1920, Charles stood on the banks of the Niagara River with his custom-made barrel. It was an oak barrel reinforced with steel hoops, and inside, he had included an anvil weighing around 100 pounds at the bottom. The anvil was meant to keep the barrel upright as it fell over the falls, much like the way the ballast of a ship stabilizes its structure in rough waters. Just think about that for a moment. A heavy anvil inside the barrel with you as you go over a 167-foot drop. It takes a special kind of man to even think of attempting this, and Charles Stevens was that special man. As Charles climbed into the barrel, I imagine the roar of the falls was deafening, with the mist swirling like a warning. His heart must have been pounding, a mix of fear and excitement coursing through him. Once the barrel was sealed, his assistants gave it a push, sending him on his way toward the edge. The barrel rocked and spun in the rushing water, pulled by the strong waves of the river. It bounced up and down, twisting as if the river was trying to shake it apart. Each wave seemed to toss it higher, only to slam it back down again, splashing water everywhere. People watched it with wide eyes as the barrel drifted closer to the edge, its movements wild and unsteady. Then, with one last tilt, it tipped forward and slid over the edge, disappearing into the roaring falls below. Minutes passed, each one stretched into what felt like hours as the crowd waited, scanning the waters downstream. Where was the barrel? Where was Charles? The tension was unbearable. Finally, they spotted something. Pieces of the barrel began to surface in the turbulent water. At first, people thought maybe Charles had made it. Maybe he'd escaped somehow. But in the mess, they found something terrible. They saw a right arm still strapped to the harness, inside what was left of the barrel. It was a horrifying sight. The anvil, meant to keep the barrel steady, ended up working against him. The extra weight caused it to crash with so much force that it couldn't withstand the impact. The barrel had shattered on the rocks below, and Charles lost his life instantly. His bold attempt to conquer the falls had turned into a devastating tragedy. Charles Stevens was the first person to die trying to cross Niagara Falls in a barrel. His story reminded the barreling community of the incredible power of nature and the dangers of pushing limits. Even the most careful plans can go catastrophically wrong when forces far beyond human control face them, and this is just the beginning. The stories of those who followed him are just as daring and even more chilling. So, buckle up, because things are only getting more intense. Our next story takes place 10 years later on July 4, 1930, and it's about a man named Stacus. Now, George was a 46-year-old Greek immigrant who settled in Buffalo, New York. George was a cool guy with big dreams and an even bigger fascination with the mysteries of life. George had a deep interest in spirituality and the afterlife. He often thought about life's biggest questions, and he felt he had a lot to share with the world. He believed that by surviving a tip over Niagara Falls, he could gain the fame and fortune needed to publish his writings on spirituality and the afterlife. And he thought that a successful stunt like crossing Niagara Falls alive would make him famous and give him a platform to share his ideas with the world. But George wasn't reckless. He spent a lot of time planning his journey. For this stunt, he designed a massive 2,000-pound oak barrel reinforced with steel to protect him from the fall's immense power. Inside, he included oxygen tanks and other supplies to sustain him through what could be a long and dangerous journey. The lid of the barrel was going to be sealed tightly, and not just for showmanship, but as a necessity. The powerful force of the Niagara Falls was enough to tear apart anything not securely closed. Also, if water entered the barrel, it could quickly sink. Sealing the lid was George's way of ensuring the barrel's integrity and his survival during the most dangerous part of the journey. Inside that dark, airtight space, George planned to rely on the oxygen tanks to sustain him while he waited to be retrieved. And he wasn't alone. In a touching decision, George brought along his pet turtle, Sonny Boy, a companion said to be over 150 years old. Taking him along showed George's belief in his plan. It's almost poetic to think of them embarking on the journey together. When the time came, George climbed into the barrel with Sonny Boy. You can see his calm reaction as the lid is sealed, and he is set adrift toward the roaring cascade. He clearly believed he was going to make it out alive. As George inched closer to the waterfall, the sound of the water must have been so loud inside the barrel. With the world reduced to the muffled roar of the falls and the creaking of wood under pressure, George's heart must have raced as the barrel bobbed and swayed in the turbulent waters. Some people were probably on the banks, watching as the massive barrel tipped over the edge and vanished into the mist. For a moment, it seemed like everything was going as planned, but that illusion didn't last long. You see, before that day, George had been warned by Red Hill Sr., a local daredevil and expert on the falls, that the barrel's size and weight might work against him. At over 10 feet long and 5 feet in diameter, the barrel weighed nearly a ton, which was far heavier than most vessels used in similar successful stunts. Hill warned him that the barrel's massive size could cause it to become trapped in the unpredictable currents near the base of the falls. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened on that fateful day of July 4th. Unlike Charles's attempt a decade earlier, George's barrel survived the fall and came out in one piece. But instead of floating downstream to safety, it got stuck in the strong currents behind the falls, spinning and rocking in a spot that was nearly impossible to reach. Inside the barrel, George must have been terrified. It was dark and cramped, and the constant roar of the falls outside would have been deafening. His oxygen supply was running out, and he probably wondered if anyone would find him in time. Then there was Sonny Boy, his pet turtle. George must have thought Sonny Boy would make it through with him. Being a turtle that could survive in water, Sonny Boy was likely better suited for the situation, but even he must have felt the chaos inside the barrel. Rescuers worked hard to reach the barrel, but its location made it nearly impossible to get to. The water was too strong, and their equipment couldn't handle the dangerous conditions. It took them over 20 hours to finally retrieve it, but by then George's oxygen had run out. When the barrel was finally opened, the outcome was devastating. George had passed away. It wasn't the fall that killed him. His planned oxygen tanks had only been designed to last for about 8 hours, but the barrel had remained in the water for over 22 hours before it was retrieved. So he suffocated inside, his oxygen supply depleted long before help arrived. In a cruel twist of fate, it was the very design he believed would protect him that became his enemy. The massive size and weight of the barrel, meant to ensure his safety, had trapped him in an inescapable prison. It's a story that makes you pause, doesn't it? But sad as it is, this tale does have a bit of a bright side to it. Miraculously, Sonny Boy, George's pet turtle survived completely unharmed. He even achieved some good fame after George's ill-fated adventure, made the news and even featured as the main character in kids' fiction books at the time. So, in a way, George's dream of being famous worked out. Of all the barrels to go over Niagara Falls, George's was the only one to become held behind by the falls. Today, that same barrel is on display in Niagara Falls, serving as a reminder of the risks of challenging nature and the cost of following your dreams. But George wasn't the only one to take that risk. On August 5, 1951, another man, William Red Hill Jr., stood on the banks of the Niagara River with his own daring plan. Unlike George, Red wasn't looking for fame or fortune. His motivations were darker and far more personal. Red was the son of William Red Hill Sr., who I just said that he warned George about his barrel design. He was a local legend and renowned Niagara daredevil, who notably warned George just a couple of decades earlier about the river's dangerous currents. And now his son was about to experience those dangers himself. Red Jr. grew up in the shadow of this remarkable legacy, often assisting his father in rescue missions and even swimming the treacherous currents himself. He followed in his footsteps as a riverman too, and even performed a couple of stunts himself. But no matter what he did, Red Jr. couldn't match his father's fame. By the early 1950s, life had taken a hard turn for Red Jr. Financial troubles from poor investments and a lack of steady work began to pile up. He even got into debt because of it. The pressure of carrying on his family's name also weighed heavily on him. The once strong Hill legacy was beginning to fade, and Red Jr. found himself desperate to revive it. Red's plan was simple on the surface, but incredibly dangerous. He would ride over the falls in a new contraption he built himself, something far from the safe barrels used by others before him. This device wasn't carefully planned or meticulously crafted. Instead, it was a thrown-together collection of materials that seemed more like a last-minute science project than a life-saving vessel. Red called it the Thing, which is a name that fits its crude, almost absurd appearance. Imagine a bundle of oversized inner tubes, lashed together loosely with canvas straps and covered in fishing nets. Sandbags were tossed in to add weight, but there was no rigid structure to keep everything secure. The inner tubes, meant to absorb the impact, bulged unevenly like a clumsy stack of oversized pool toys. The whole thing looked more like a floating scrap heap than something designed to withstand the 167-foot drop over Niagara Falls. From the moment it was unveiled, people doubted its safety. People talked about its poor construction, and experts warned Red Jr. about the near-impossible odds of survival. His friends even begged him to reconsider. But Red was determined. He needed the stunt to work. He needed the attention, the thrill, and above all, the financial payoff. Desperation often drowns out reason. For him, this was more than just a stunt. It was his shot at redemption. As the crowd gathered that fateful day in August, Red Jr. climbed into the Thing. The fragile-looking contraption was set adrift in the churning waters of the Niagara River. It floated awkwardly, bobbing and twisting in the rapids as it was pulled closer to the edge. As scary as it was, people couldn't look away. Unlike the tightly sealed barrels used by others, Red's vessel was open and exposed, its structure barely holding together as it approached the edge. When the Thing reached the edge of the falls, it tipped over and vanished into the roaring mist. The crowd held their breath, waiting for a sign, any sign that Red Jr. had survived. But moments later, pieces of the Thing began to surface. Shredded inner tubes, frayed canvas, and tangled nets scattered across the river like confetti. One can only imagine what Red Hill Jr. felt as the Thing flew over the edge of Niagara Falls. His body would have slammed violently against the fragile frame as the force of the drop took hold. The open design offered no protection, so the power of the water crashing against him would have knocked the air out of his lungs and left him gasping in the chaos. As you can imagine, Red Jr. did not survive the experience. His body was recovered the next day, downstream near the Maid of the Mist dock. It was in a rough shape. YouTube rules prevent me from fully describing the state of his body in detail, but you can guess how a human body that suddenly and violently smashed the rocks on Niagara Falls would look like. News of Red's demise spread quickly. His death sent shockwaves through the local community, many of whom had gathered that day to watch his stunt, hoping for a miracle, but witnessing a disaster. Red's death marked a turning point in the culture of stunts at Niagara Falls. Authorities began to crack down on stunts and daredevil attempts. Although efforts to regulate them had already been in place, Red's death brought safety regulations up to a whole new level. Permits became harder to obtain, and penalties for unauthorized attempts were increased, further discouraging reckless acts. Since that day, no permission has been granted to allow any stunting within the park. So while Red's ill-fated stunt might have been seen as ill thought out, no one can deny the positive changes the incident brought after. The line between bravery and recklessness is a thin one, and it is a line that many before and after him have dared to cross in their quest to defy the mighty falls. But as we'll see in the next story, even the most calculated attempts to challenge Niagara can lead to tragedy. Imagine deciding to ride a kayak over the edge of Niagara Falls, trusting in your skill and preparation to see you through. That's exactly what Jesse Sharp set out to do on June 5, 1990. By 1990, stunts like these were strictly forbidden, and Jesse Sharp's daring plan wasn't sanctioned by park authorities. But Jesse was determined to make his mark despite the rules. Jesse was not your ordinary kayaker. The 28-year-old experienced whitewater kayaker from Tennessee had made a name for himself navigating some of North America's most dangerous rapids. He was brilliant at his craft. For him, the river was a place of control and challenge, where his abilities could shine. But Jesse wasn't content with simply being one of the best. He had bigger dreams and ambitions that extended beyond the rivers he had conquered. He wanted to be remembered, to make history, and to carve his name into the books for his daring feats. And the idea of paddling over Niagara Falls, something no one had ever done in a canoe, had been on his mind for a long time. And in 1990, Jesse decided to turn his dream into reality. For Jesse, it wasn't just about the thrill of the attempt, but the legacy it would leave behind. He believed that successfully navigating the falls would launch him into a new realm of recognition. Fame, movie deals, professional stunt work, the whole package. Jesse spent months preparing for what he thought would be his defining moment. He chose a sleek, 12-foot fiberglass canoe, custom-made for speed and agility, believing it would give him the edge he needed to survive the unforgiving currents. His confidence in his skill was unshakable, so much so that he decided he wouldn't wear a helmet or a life jacket. To Jesse, a helmet might obstruct his vision, and a life jacket could impede his ability to escape turbulent waters. These were risks he was willing to take. Why did he really do it? Perhaps it was the allure of being the first, the draw of immortality through a daring act no one else had achieved. Maybe it was the belief that his talent was so exceptional. He could defy the odds where so many others had failed. Whatever it was, he was so confident in his success that he was willing to risk his life on it. At around 1:45 p.m. on that fateful day, Jesse launched his canoe into the Niagara River upstream from the falls. His plan was simple enough: paddle fast enough to build the speed he needed to propel himself cleanly over the edge of Niagara Falls. After surviving the drop, he would paddle through the rapids of the Niagara Gorge and finish his journey in Lewiston, New York. Sounds so simple, right? His confidence was absolute. He parked his car in Lewiston and had even made dinner reservations at a local restaurant for later that evening. As Jesse paddled toward the brink, the roar of the water must have grown louder, with the mist rising like a curtain ahead of him. People on the falls that day watched in awe, unable to believe their eyes when he approached the edge. His paddle strokes were steady and purposeful. The adrenaline must have been surging through his veins as each moment brought him closer to the defining point of his career. Witnesses later said they saw him raise his paddle high above his head, a final gesture of confidence before the kayak tipped over the edge and disappeared into the roaring water below. Onlookers stood silent, waiting for Jesse to emerge, for the moment when he would surface and paddle to shore. But as the minutes stretched on, no one came. Rescuers quickly began searching the lower river for any sign of him or his kayak. But despite those efforts, Jesse was never seen again. His dented canoe was found several hundred yards downstream an hour later. But to this day, he is yet to be found. Jesse Sharp's attempt to become the first person to kayak over Niagara Falls is a story of bold ambition to some and pure recklessness to others. But whatever side you are on, the next story takes daring to a whole new level. On October 1st, 1995, Robert Overaker, a 39-year-old stuntman from Camarillo, California, approached the Niagara River not in a barrel, canoe, or kayak, but on a jet ski. Yes, you heard that right, a jet ski. But Robert wasn't just an adrenaline junkie, though, just a man deeply concerned about the issue of homelessness. He believed that by performing a spectacular stunt at Niagara Falls, he could draw significant attention to the fate of the homeless and inspire action. I can only admire the dedication it takes to risk your life for a cause. Robert planned to ride a jet ski over the edge of the Horseshoe Falls and deploy a parachute to land safely below. It was a bold and risky move, but it wasn't meant to be a fatal one. On that quiet day of October 1st, Robert arrived at the Niagara River. Dressed in a wetsuit and helmet, he made final preparations while the roar of the falls filled the air. The plan was simple. The jet ski was meant to give him the speed and momentum he needed to clear the edge cleanly. Once cleared, Robert was going to descend safely into the war below with the help of a parachute. In his planning, there was one detail Robert overlooked. His parachute had never been tested under these conditions, and for his stunt, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Literally. As Robert sped toward the falls, his jet ski cutting cleanly through the water, people watched in stunned silence. The roar of the falls grew louder with every second as he approached the edge, and you can see the critical moment here where Robert launched himself off the jet ski and activated his parachute. And, yep, you guessed it. The chute did not open. The exact cause of the parachute's malfunction remains unknown. When a parachute doesn't open, the person falls faster and faster, with nothing to slow them down. At those speeds, hitting the water is like slamming into concrete. It doesn't give way. On top of that, the water at the base of the falls is rough and chaotic, swirling violently in every direction. Surviving such a fall is almost impossible. Robert must have felt sheer terror as he fell, knowing there was no way to stop. He hit the water below the 167-foot drop of the Horseshoe Falls, and despite rescue teams rushing to respond, it was already too late. His body was found downstream the next day and taken to Niagara General Hospital, where it was officially confirmed he had passed away. Robert's case might have been a sad lesson in the risks of defying Niagara Falls, but it wasn't the last time someone attempted to challenge its power. Our final story on Niagara Falls takes us to April 19, 2017, and to one of the strangest stories we have ever told on this channel. This is the tale of Kirk Jones, a man who challenged Niagara Falls not once, but twice. Let me explain. Back in October 2003, Kirk Jones, a 40-year-old man from Michigan, made headlines around the world. He became the first person to survive a plunge over Niagara Falls without any protective equipment. That's pretty remarkable in itself, isn't it? The sheer audacity it must have taken to stand at the edge of one of the most powerful waterfalls on Earth and decide to jump in with nothing but the clothes on your back is almost unimaginable. Kirk was reportedly struggling with personal issues at the time and took the plunge in what some believe was a desperate act. Miraculously, he survived the 167-foot drop of the Horseshoe Falls, emerging from the waters with only minor injuries. His survival was considered nothing short of a miracle, and it put him into an unexpected spotlight. Media outlets interviewed him multiple times, and for a brief moment, he was famous. But with that fame came legal repercussions. Due to his illegal stunt, he was fined and banned from entering Canada for life. Fast forward to April 2017. Kirk, now 53, seemed to have an unresolved connection with the falls. This time, he planned a stunt that he believed would not only be survivable, but also launch a career in entertainment. His idea? to go over Niagara Falls inside an inflatable ball, accompanied by his pet boa constrictor, Misty. Yes, you heard that correctly. He wanted to cross one of the most powerful waterfalls in the world, with a giant inflatable ball and a snake as a guest. For his stunt, Kirk bought a large plastic ball online, the type used in the sport of zorbing, where people roll downhill inside a ball. Kirk believed that this ball would cushion the impact of the fall and allow him to survive the plunge once more. Why? Who knows? Perhaps he thought rolling downhill was the same as crossing a waterfall. In any case, succeeding here was sure to solidify his legacy and offer a new chance at life. On that fateful day in April, witnesses reported seeing Kirk launch the inflatable ball into the Niagara River above the falls. The current was fast as usual, and the water roared. As the ball floated toward the edge, it's possible that Kirk realized something was wrong because, according to reports, the powerful rapids caused the ball to spin wildly. When authorities later retrieved the ball, it was found empty, suggesting that Kirk might have even ejected before it went over the falls. But we will never know. It doesn't take a genius to put two and two together. Going over Niagara Falls without external protection is a near-certain recipe for disaster. Rescue teams were dispatched immediately, and they searched the waters below in hopes of finding him alive. Unfortunately, Kirk's body was recovered by the U.S. Coast Guard on June 2, 2017, about 12 miles downstream from the falls. His pet snake, Misty, was never found. The man who had once miraculously survived a plunge over Niagara had been claimed by the very force he had dared to challenge again. Kirk Jones's story is a strange one. His initial survival was deemed a miracle, a once-in-a-lifetime stroke of incredible luck. And it definitely was. To attempt the feat a second time was a gamble that didn't pay off. It makes me wonder the extent to which the human spirit drives people to tempt fate. Not just once, but again, even after surviving the impossible. What compels someone to return to the brink, knowing firsthand the immense power of Niagara Falls? Is it the allure of recapturing that fleeting moment of survival, a desire to defy the odds once more? Or is it something deeper, a need to prove that lightning can indeed strike twice? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay bold and live brave.